Good morning, Glen Cove High School. This is Jake Leibowitz for GCTV, and welcome to the Friday Morning News. This week, some social studies students had a rare opportunity to listen to a survivor from a very dark period in African history. Reporter Sarah Ayuku has that story.
Hi, Glen Cove High School. This is Sarah Ayuku for GCTV, and this week, Console, a Rwandan genocide survivor, was here to tell her story. Let's check it out. In 1994, in the small East African country of Rwanda, a devastating genocide unfolded, one of the most horrific the world has seen in recent history. In just 100 days, over 800,000 people were killed, most of them from the Tutsi ethnic group. It was a time of unimaginable fear, loss, and brutality. Neighbors turned against neighbors, and families were torn apart. But it was also a story of survival, of strength, and of the power to rebuild. Today at Glen Cove High School, we heard from someone who lived through it, a survivor who carries the memory of those days and the hope for a better future.
My name is Console Nishimwe. I was, a Tutsi through, of course, my family, because they had an ID card, which, had, them as a Tutsis. That's how I became a Tutsi, of course. But I didn't have ID yet because I was not 16. But I was, of course, a Tutsi because my family was a Tutsi. I was in the ID card. So that ID card actually had Hutu, Tutsi, and Twa. Whatever you were mentioned, that's when they had to show where if you are Hutu or Tutsi or Hutu, whatever you were at that time. So, yes, that ID card was almost like a life sentence to a Tutsi. It's almost like, you would be killed if you had that, that ID card. Of course, it was not easy, but of course at the same time, I didn't think too much about it until, of course, with the discrimination and, we have gone through, I realized being a Tutsi was not easy at that time, so.
By the end of the conflict, Console lost her father, her two brothers, and several members of her extended family.
My dad was a good man, a loving parent, a loving dad. He loved his family. He was very, very humble, and he loved people. My dad was my best friend. I really loved him so much. I miss him a lot every day. Even now, I'm 31 years later, I still think about him every time I think of anything, if I go through any pain. And I always wonder, because my dad was a good person, I always think that what my dad would do if he goes through what I'm going through.
Were you able to properly send him off?
No, which is the hardest thing because we never found his body yet until now.
It happens after decades or even centuries in some cases of discrimination, propaganda, as you said in your testimony, them on the radio, calling Tutsis cockroaches, you have to exterminate them, right?
In order for a genocide really to work well, a government really has to be involved. So the government really prepared it. That's the reason why everywhere throughout the country, Tutsis were killed.
Our mission at HMTC is to do a lot of teacher training and staff development. So we want the schools to know that Console will come and speak, and that we feel very committed to preserving the memory of what happened in Rwanda and the connection between Holocaust education and this Rwandan genocide is the parallels are unbelievable.
Console currently lives in New York City and spends much of her free time speaking to students, making sure that people never forget the tragedy that unfolded in Rwanda.
In every person's story, there's some lesson to learn. Even myself, I learn from my own story. So I feel like somebody else can learn something from my story. If I can learn also myself from my own story. So it helps me even with whatever else I go through in life. I go back to what I've gone through in the past and also to learn from it. I feel like somebody else can learn from that too, so from my story.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Console. Your story was truly remarkable. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. This has been Sarah Ayuku for GCTV. Back to the studio.
Thanks, Sarah. This was definitely an important assembly to attend. Thanks to Ms. Poulos, the Social Studies Department, and the Holocaust Center in Glen Cove for setting this up. That's all for this week for GCTV. This has been Jake Leibowitz. Thanks for watching and have an awesome spring break.